So there may be trouble brewing in the Toronto real estate market. And while we expected that things were going to get somewhat back to normal coming into the fall after the normal sort of slowdown in the summer, there's some trouble that might be on the horizon with respect to the number of new listings. And I'm going to discuss what that means for you, what that means if you're buying a house in Toronto, and all of the details with respect to what's going on there, including the $1.1 million record price. Or is it a $1.1 million record price? I'll discuss that as well. But before we get into it, do me that favor, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, please hit that like button so more people like you can see this video. And don't forget about our race to 25,000 subscribers. We're one lucky subscriber when we finally get to 25,000 subscribers. And I appreciate the almost 17,000 of you who have already subscribed. When we get to 25,000 subscribers, we're gonna give away $5,000. So one lucky winner can put $5,000 towards their RESP, TFSA, pay down their mortgage, maybe use it for a down payment or pay down other debt, to do whatever they like. But one thing is for certain, you have to be subscribed to win. So go ahead, it's free, it's easy, and it's definitely worth it. The definitive guide on how to manage your credit, product, penalty, price in that order. It's never been more important to get your mortgage right. Okay, so let's get into it. Let's discuss the Toronto real estate market. And first and foremost, the thing that is making the biggest headlines is the $1.1 million average price that is seasonally adjusted for August, that is indicating that housing prices in Toronto are at the highest they've ever been. I'm going to talk about why that isn't necessarily true a little bit later on in the video, but the big story here and the piece that really concerns me is the lack of inventory. And the inventory in Toronto's real estate market coming into September is the lowest that it has been in over a decade. And here's the problem with low inventory. What low inventory leads to is potentially higher prices. Because if inventory doesn't come on real quick, then it leads to less options for buyers. Less options for buyers lead to bidding wars, and bidding wars lead to higher prices. And we thought we were through the thick of this with the Toronto real estate market. We thought that we were going to be able to go into the fall and not have to worry about big bidding wars, all the craziness that happened in the spring. And unfortunately, it looks like if we don't see some inventory get on the market really, really fast, we might find ourselves back in that situation, and we might see Toronto housing prices go even higher into the fall, which is really scary considering that we're in the process of an election, considering that we're in the process of having the highest real estate prices ever across Canada, and that there's just been some craziness. So no longer is this an issue of people having preference changes. What this is now an issue of is people are no longer wanting to sell their properties because they're finding themselves in the properties that they like. Now, what could be happening here is we could see people just not wanting to sell their house in the summer and people planning on listing in the fall. That sometimes is normal, but nonetheless, it is scary what's going on there if we don't see some listings coming up fast. So let's jump into this real quick and take a look at the headlines. Normally on a real estate update, I would just go straight to the Toronto Real Estate Board and their data and their news releases, but I wanted to portray how this is being played out in the media. First of all, alarming, which this is alarming, is the headline, and then Toronto home prices hit 1.1 million with supply at decade low. Now, the $1.1 million piece isn't as big of a deal, but the supply at decade low is. And let's first and foremost, let's talk about the $1.1 million, because the number that they are quoting here is the seasonally adjusted price. So we've gone through the entire year and we've talked about average price hitting all-time highs, average price, average price, average price. And now what the media is picking up is average price seasonally adjusted. So not all things are equal here. We aren't talking about the same types of numbers as we were earlier in the year. And I want to show you first and foremost, this is in the Treb news release that talks about the benchmark price. The benchmark price right now is $1,070,000. This reached almost $1.1 million earlier in the year when it got up to $1,095,000. It didn't break that $1.1 million threshold, if memory serves me correctly. Vancouver definitely did, but the average price, the average benchmark price right now in Toronto's market is $1,070,000, which is slightly down from earlier in the year. Now, the numbers that the media is quoting are the seasonally adjusted numbers. And if you take a look at this, this is all the seasonally adjusted numbers going back to August of 2020. And you can see here's the highs in March. and then prices come down and then gradually come back up. And what this means when you look at seasonally adjusted values versus non-seasonally adjusted values is what they're doing is they're taking a look at all the previous years and what the market should be doing in an August, which is usually the prices should be coming down a little bit. And they're saying, okay, well, they didn't go down as much as they were supposed to. So therefore, what we're actually seeing is we're seeing price increases relative to the other months, which means the seasonally adjusted price is actually higher than the previous months, even though the actual average price was higher in previous months. So while the seasonally adjusted compared to other previous years bumps up that price in Toronto to $1.1 million, if you look at the actual average prices in Toronto are still less than they were previously in the previous few months. So in other words, if you bought a house earlier in the year compared to now, you would have paid significantly more probably in April or May than you would right now. That doesn't mean that you aren't spending a ton, because you are, but you have to be careful about these seasonally adjusted numbers and taking a look at how they're portrayed in the market. Now, what that could mean is going into the fall and going into next spring, we could see housing prices increase even more and even more. And that's what I want to talk about, is why they might do that when it otherwise wasn't expected. So let's jump in and take a look at TREB's quick stats. Now, one thing to keep in mind here is when you look at what's happening in the real estate world right now, what we saw in the last year was basically housing prices increasing because of low interest rates. And housing prices tend to increase for two reasons. One is because it gets cheaper to purchase from the perspective of the amount that you're paying on a monthly basis. So it's basically payment cost rather than housing cost. And the second is when you have a lack of supply or an increase in demand. Now, we had an increase in demand last year, but we had fairly limited supply. And what we're seeing going into 2021, or September of 2021, is we're seeing even further reduced supply. Now, this is where it gets crazy, because you can have interest rates that are going up, you can have higher monthly costs, but if you have a supply issue and a significant supply issue that's getting worse, you can have serious run-ups in prices. This is what happened in 2006 in Canada when we saw housing prices jump substantially in a matter of 3 or 4 months. Ask me all about that. I sold a condo in October of 2005 and missed out on about $150,000 in price gains between then and June of 2006. So let's take a quick look here and just talk about what's going on, because here are the year-over-year numbers of transactions. Obviously, we have less transactions this year than we had last year. We have less transactions in August than we have in July. And the average price is pushing that $1,070,000. Those aren't any numbers that concern me. I mean, the $1,070,000 number is really interesting. It's quite high. But the thing that concerns me here is the total new listings. So if you look at August of 2020, there were 18,599 new listings. And if you look at this year, there's only 10,609. What that means is obviously we've got the lowest number of listings in a decade, and we've got substantially less than last year. So think about what happened in August of last year with housing prices running up and increasing, and think about what that would mean if you saw significantly less supply available this year. We all know about the supply issues of houses. It's a major political topic, a major political trend right now. Now take that and basically cut it in half, or almost in half, for this year. And that could be an indication of what's going to happen going into the fall. Now, obviously there's some ceilings on that. Is there enough buyers potentially there in order to purchase properties? Is there enough qualifying room for housing prices to go up substantially more? There's a whole bunch of things to consider here, but this is the thing that is really concerning, or as BNN put it, really alarming. And if you look at sales to new listing ratios, we're seeing there's still a significant percentage of the new listings being sold. That number is higher than last year, which means that a higher percentage of the new listings are actually getting sold on a month-to-month basis. That usually leads to increases in prices. And then properties days on market, you're seeing they're there for less time, 21 days versus 24 last year. And overall, it's a very, very complicated situation going into the fall of 2021 if you're looking to buy a property in Toronto, because all the signs are showing towards there being more upward pressure in the Toronto market. So if you've been sitting on the fence thinking about getting into the market and you're thinking, hey, I'm waiting for that crash, I'm waiting for prices to come down, and I'm thinking fall is when it's going to happen, I'm going to tell you right now that unless something substantially changes in the real estate market, the financial markets, in lending, in the banking, then there's a good chance you're gonna be paying more in the fall than you are right now. So if you're thinking about getting into the market and you're waiting for that crash, I'm not saying necessarily jump into it. I'm just saying don't expect that prices are gonna get lower anytime soon, at least by the end of the year. Now, here's the thing. If you're a seller, when you're a seller and you see low inventory, that means buyers don't have a ton of options. And what that means is that you have the ability to become one of those few options and get top dollar for your house. So if you're thinking about selling, now is probably a really good time to sell. And ultimately, what's going to determine what happens in the Toronto real estate market in the next few months, all else being equal, is how many people decide this fall that they want to sell that property that they've been holding on to, or maybe they want to move back to where they were previously because those preferences that they thought had changed about where they wanted to live weren't necessarily what they actually wanted, unless there's a pretty significant amount of increase in inventory coming into the fall. It's going to be really, really interesting in Toronto's real estate market. Now, we go into a whole bunch of other stuff on this in our homebuyer bootcamp, which isn't open for registration right now. It will be in the next few weeks. If you're looking at getting into the market, I highly encourage you to take that course and get on the waiting list to get into it, because we're going to discuss how to make sure you protect yourself from crazy markets like what Toronto is shaping up to be. And if you're also looking to get into the market and you want to know how to get the lowest interest rates, we've got a course on that as well. It's priced so low that anybody who's getting a mortgage will get at least 10 to 50 times their money back, including if you end up choosing Mortgage 360 for a mortgage. We've put an offer in there to guarantee that you'll get at least 10 times your money back. Typically, people are getting 10, 50, even 75 to 100 times their money back on that course. It's priced super, super low. Talks about how to negotiate with your bank, how to negotiate with your broker, and all the things associated with getting the lowest interest rate, including the things that you can negotiate into your mortgage and things you can't, and all of the things with respect to how much margin is available for you to get a lower rate, as well as the landmines and the surprises that come along with discount mortgages and what you should be watching out for, especially when you're getting a mortgage with your bank. So if you are so inclined, there's a link in the description below for 50% off the already discounted price. And if not, do me that favor, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. Please hit that like button so more people like you can see this video. Don't forget about that race to 25,000 subscribers. And if you are buying in Toronto this year, I wish you the best of luck going into the fall market. If you need help, Mortgage 360 is here to help. We'll see you in the next video. Cheers.